come to realize over the last few years the kind of parallel paths that we've been on around purpose, and his company Imperative and our company Izzo Associates do some similar but different work inside companies. And so we've really become partners to really collaborate to really help companies go to the next level. So Arthur, maybe do a quick introduction of yourself before we get into the meat of our conversation today.
Yeah, John. Well, thanks. And yeah, it's amazing when you're traveling the world and realizing you're meeting a neighbor abroad. So John and I met, and I think immediately realized we were kindred spirits in this work, and how complementary our approaches were, but also how aligned I think our values were. And that's always what you want. For me, a very interesting purpose journey, starting a business at a young age and seeing my very first perception of work really being that work is an expression of who you are. Work is an extension of you and not something you conform to. It should amplify who you are. And becoming an entrepreneur at a young age, I never saw work as a means to an end. I just always saw it as this creative expression, almost form of art, so to speak. And had a challenge then taking that mindset into the corporate world, where I found I was a cog in the wheel, and I was someone who didn't oftentimes feel like I was making a difference or feel like I had a great sense of meaning. And my career led me actually over to Google. And in the earlier days of Google, found that, even there in such a resource-rich environment where people were given everything they could ever want at work, beanbag chairs and lunch, and free lunches and the micro kitchen snacks. But I saw that the extrinsic motivators of work that we oftentimes use to try to move people and influence behavior were falling far short, honestly. And I found myself in a place where I was not inspired there either. And really, it was after a mindset shift for me that I began to realize work is not either purposeful or not, and certain jobs are not purpose jobs or not purpose jobs. Your sense of purpose and meaning is a choice, and it's a mindset that you either bring or you don't. And in seeing so many people who were struggling with this same challenge of, do I go to a place where I have my material needs met and I sacrifice my sense of purpose, or do I go find purpose and not necessarily have my material comforts provided for? And this crossroads that so many people find themselves in every day, I thought was a failure of our system and a failure of design, and something that a choice that I don't think people should ever have to make. And and this really will get to the heart of our conversation, but that was really the impetus with which I left Google and began to ask this question: how can we ensure that purpose is not a luxury? How can we ensure that people don't have to choose between their material value and their sense of meaning at work? And how can organizations embrace a new version of work where everyone in their workforce indeed is connected to purpose? And so that's the meat of, I think, what we're talking about today, but
Great.
A little bit of the journey.
Yeah, thank you. And so let's actually kind of begin to dig in today. I know you didn't. Yeah. You came here today because you really wanted to hear some real meat around things. So we want to start really, the theme of today's presentation, very much how to activate employee purpose. And Arthur, I think a great place to begin is why does identifying, personal purpose matter for us individually and, for an organization? Let me share some thoughts, and I'd love you to chime in.
Yeah.
It seems to me the first reason is, my friend Jim Kouzes, who's written a bunch of leadership books, did some fascinating research on employee commitment and engagement and its relationship to people's kind of connection to the values or purpose of a company versus knowing their own purpose or values and living them at work. And it turns out that the organization's purpose actually doesn't have often a significant impact on people's engagement or commitment, nearly as significant as we think it does, but people understanding their own purpose and values and feeling like they're living them at work is a very strong predictor of people being engaged and committed. And it strikes me that one reason we ought to be concerned about that is that many people don't really know what their purpose is. They don't really know how to articulate it, never mind whether they feel like they're living it at work. And the other reason that I think this is so important is it turns out that there's a very strong connection between people being ambassadors for an organization, speaking very positively about the organization, saying, I'm proud to work for this organization.
Yeah.
When they feel they're making a difference day in and day in their job. And one of my large clients who we're doing a huge purpose project with, they wanted to know what makes people ambassadors, what predicts them to be ambassadors. And they were even surprised to find out the single best predictor was whether people felt like they were making a difference in their job day in and day out.
Yeah.
Now, they did care about the company's purpose and the company doing good things, but that wasn't nearly as strong a predictor of being a great ambassador as people feeling like, they were getting to live a purpose day to day in their work. What would you add to that? Why is it so important that we take this seriously?
Well, and this paradigm shift that we're witnessing right now, I'll talk about it a little bit more. But if we step back and think of what's really the essence of all of this, what we're talking about is people having a sense of ownership in their jobs in a way that's never been the case. Employees not being cogs in a wheel that are beholden to organizations, but feeling as though their personal contributions are making a difference every day. That the work that the organization is doing is tied to who those people are at their core as individuals. And, if we think of the term engagement, the engagement is currently the be all end all. We usually where most organizations are measuring success. What do we really believe causes someone to be engaged at work? If you start to think of the things that influence someone being engaged at work, well, feeling like you actually personally are contributing, feeling like you are part of something you believe in, feeling as though you're growing and learning and stretching yourself every day. These core needs that we've always had as human beings outside of work, that we all would say a successful life is when I've done X, Y, Z. We have to start applying that very mindset to people's jobs. And it is fundamentally shifting the social contract between employers and their employees. So I think that's really what we'll be diving into today. But I completely agree, John. I think this is a massive shift that organizations are making. They're seeing results when they do.
Yeah. And, piggyback on something you said there, Arthur, I've been, as somebody who's been involved in working with employee engagement for almost 30 years, what struck me is that for the last 30 years, about 95% of the research and attention in engagement has been on the role that leaders play in activating engagement in employees. And of course, we have a huge impact as leaders. But so little attention has been paid to the way people activate engagement or purpose for themselves. So that's why I'm so excited today to talk about this. And by the way, one reason I wanted to do this webinar with Arthur is a couple of years ago, we were thinking, how do you help people really identify their purpose and have an architecture for that? And we were actually going to create a tool to do that. It's not, the main work we do is around really leadership and helping organizations design purpose systems and training leaders. And then I discovered that the folks at Imperative had actually created a tool. So we said, instead of building it, let's partner with them to make it available to clients. So Arthur, I really want to get into this architecture that you guys have built. And let me say that what's exciting, and we've been working with clients with this Imperative tool, is that Imperative's created a tool that actually helps people identify their purpose, where their purpose comes from, and also begins to create a way for people to have conversations with each other and with their leaders about their purpose. So I wonder, Arthur, if you can begin to talk a little bit about your model for how people can identify and define their purpose, and just walk us through a little bit that, thinking behind it and the tool that you guys have created that I think is such an exciting thing.
Well, absolutely, John. If you mind going just one slide back, just to set the stage. So Just to set the stage of why now, and John, I think, did a really beautiful job of already painting this picture. Today, 2 in 3 people in the workforce are not working with purpose. 2 in 3 people say that their work is unfulfilling. And we already know that stress-related diseases are the leading cause of death. And also, employers are struggling with the talent crisis of how am I going to find the best talented people who are going to fill these roles, and what does success even look like in these roles. So we know that work as it is isn't working. This is really where John and I believe we have some work cut out for us. On to the next slide, when we start to think of the paradigm shift that can be made. At the beginning of people's careers, we tend to ask them the question, what skills do you need to be successful? Because you went and you studied XYZ, the role that you're now jumping into requires XYZ. Those are the skills that you're going to need. Later on, we start to then help people think about their strengths. And then usually at the end of their careers, when they start thinking of their legacy and retirement, we then ask these really important questions about their purpose. And this chronology is really what exists. And you can almost think of it as learn, earn, return. We go to school, we learn, we finally, make money, and then we give back to the world when we return. And we have to ask ourselves the question, does this chronology work? Is it okay to wait until the end of someone's career to get them to ask these important questions of why am I here and who am I and what difference do I want to make? And so what John, I think, has nicely touched on, and this gets to the model itself, is a paradigm shift. And so on to the next slide. The idea that if today we're defining people as resources and we're asking them, what skills do you need to be successful, which is leading, by the way, to low psychological safety, high burnout, a fixed mindset, low adaptability to change. The next version of this, on to the next slide, is that we start to flip the equation and we ask people early on in their careers, what do you stand for? What impact do you want to make? Who are you at your core? And the idea behind this is that we're encouraging people to be human beings at work, to ask difficult questions that I think, to John's point, have been previously really hard for people to answer. But we're empowering them with that ability early on to bring their full selves to work. And what that leads to, we believe, is higher psychological safety, a sense of resilience, an open mindset, and a higher adaptability to change. The very things we really want from our people, but we ask sort of why is it we can't achieve them? And really we believe it's because we're not getting people to think about purpose earlier on enough.
Yeah, and Arthur, I can't help think, I know you're familiar as we are, we write about it in The Purpose Revolution. Amy Rosinski's research at Yale University, and now many around the world have replicated the fact that people who see their job as a calling and are working from that calling place, not only are they happier and less stressed, but they actually perform better on every metric that we care about as leaders. They even call in sick less, right? And
That's right.
So if we can begin to get people connected to their purpose, they are happier, less stressed, but also perform at a much higher level.
And that is exactly it. And Amy's work was highly influential for us. As John knows, so the way that we landed on this work, realizing that purpose has to happen, purpose has to be sequenced at the beginning, not at the end. What are the barriers to that happening today? Well, one of them is people don't necessarily know how to answer this question of what is my purpose. It's a tough question. It's not even a fair question because the question itself carries with it a lot of myths and misconceptions. When you ask someone, what is my purpose? Some people think, well, to answer it, I have to go find Julia Roberts and do an Eat, Pray, Love retreat. Some people think my purpose is my cause. It's saving the whales. I found it. It's outside in the community. Other people think I can't even begin to answer it until the end of my career when I finally can cash out. So to overcome those myths and misconceptions, my co-founder, Aaron, founded an organization called the Taproot Foundation. And they were the very first marketplace for pro bono consultants who had full-time jobs and would go out into the community and donate their skills, not getting paid, not getting promoted, but because they said it gave them purpose. And Aaron began to study what it was that intrinsically motivated these volunteers, and he found that this begins to be some of the secret formula. If we can help predict the things that uniquely generate purpose for you and help you overcome these myths and misconceptions about where to find purpose, it would give us the ability to sequence purpose earlier on in your career. And this gets to now the meat of the framework itself. So we're, as John knows, we team up with Izzo and Associates, and we spearhead research around purpose in the workplace. We are a B Corp, and so for us at Imperative, our mission is to spread the awareness and also help kind of fuel some disruptive technology around purpose. And we love when we can work with kindred spirits and thought leaders like John, because John helps tell the world that this is needed, and then helps leaders actually do something about it, which is really necessary. So John, if it works, we can dive into a little bit of the science of all of this.
Yeah, let's do that.
So here were the 3 dimensions we found were the foundation of purpose. When Aaron was doing this research in the pro bono space, and people said, okay, well, if I switch causes, I can still find purpose, and I don't have to wait until retirement to find it. And we started to really look at then what is it that's generating purpose. It came down to 3 core aspects of how we generate purpose. The first is our values. What do we uniquely stand for that makes us who we are? When we see the world, our place in it, and we look at our perception of fairness and responsibility, what are those core values that we harness? The second piece is our craft. What is the unique way that we lead when we're at our best? The way that we approach our problem solving, and the way that we approach our leadership. And we call this our craft, the unique natural talents we bring to the world. And then finally, our impact. What's that preferred scale at which we're making a difference, so that we are constantly feeling like we're making a contribution and doing work that's significant? So our impact and our values and our craft, interestingly enough, form a structure that helps us answer this question really of what is my North Star? And yep. And John, I'm curious your thoughts on that, or your
I love it. And I think what I love about this model, and by the way, we will be taking questions towards the end. So if you have questions, get them out there. We'll be getting to those. But what I love about this, Arthur, is it really begins to get an architecture around purpose, this sort of, very ephemeral thing. And I think even for myself, I can immediately link into this. And of course, I've taken the tool as well. But so what are my values? What do I care about most? I care about the environment. I care about sustainable future for the world. I care about helping people become more intentional about their lives. What's my craft? I love to speak. I love to write. I love to tell stories. What's my impact? I love impacting systems and watching whole systems change, right? So you begin to say, where is Izzo going to find purpose? Well, he's going to find purpose where he can use those skills of storytelling and communication, where he can live those values around sustainability and helping people be more intentional, and where I can have an impact on a system, not just on individuals, right?
Yeah.
So I think what I love about this, and this works, for someone in almost any kind of job. So that's what I love about this architecture, is that I think it kind of begins to demystify this idea of where, as this slide says, people experience meaning.
That's exactly right. And, I think when we start to ask that question of where I'm going to be at my best, we believe your work can change, your role can change, your industry can change. Hopefully these things that make you who you are stay the same. And that's a freeing and sort of liberating idea, that with so much that we don't know, there are some things about ourselves that we do know. So we've defined purpose in so many different ways, your North Star, your personal why. One of the things that we found in our research is when you're aligned to these drivers, it is exactly what gives you meaning. And John mentioned some amazing stats or amazing points earlier on about the business case. When someone's connected to a sense of personal purpose, we now know that they're 20% likely to stay longer in their job. They're the brand ambassadors that John mentioned. And they're actually, according to Bain & Company, when connected to personal purpose and being inspired in your work, you're twice as productive. So that in and of itself, to me, is just game changing. If we can get the workforce to be twice as productive, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
There's
huge,
a monetary value. But one of the things about this is purpose is not always very observable. These aspects that John was mentioning, I mean, John, luckily, you meet him at an event and you can already tell he's an amazing storyteller, and you could probably talk to him and get to know a little bit about his system thinking. But purpose and these variables, we can't walk up to someone on a train and say, hey, John, I saw an expression in your eye. You seem to be driven by fairness, So because these are beneath the surface, we have to, give people the willpower to bring them out at work. And this really is the utility behind building a common language where all of a sudden our purpose drivers are not something that we just say, well, like, I love my kids and you care about whales and John's going to retire one day and find his purpose. We can actually say purpose is across these three dimensions. This is what we share. This is how we complement each other. This is how we can work together, right? So the idea behind a shared lexicon makes this a very powerful movement all of a sudden.
Yeah, I agree.
So these are the an explanation, and one of the things that that Izzo's done, and give them a lot of I'll give them a lot of credit, is enabled us to share a complementary purpose profile with you because you've attended this webinar. So while you're going through all of this and hearing kind of the voiceover, we're going to follow up with a link where you can go and actually request your own purpose profile. You'll go through a 15-minute questionnaire. It'll give you a full dashboard and report that helps you understand where are your purpose drivers showing up. And we can geek out with you on that. So just to give you a sense, neurologically, across these three dimensions, you have a preference for a purpose driver in each one of them. So around your craft, you have a certain craft that is your most intended way of leading. For John, that's a systems way of leading. You have a core value on a spectrum of this moral foundation theory that Jonathan Haidt researched. You have a core moral value that you tend to gravitate towards between what we call karma and harmony. And you have an intended scale of impact that typically is where you're at your best. When you tell the story of why your work matters based on who it serves, you tend to have a prevailing narrative about who that is, whether that's people, whether that's organizations, or whether that's society. And so what we want you to be able to do in this process is sort of figure out, when you are working in the greatest alignment with your sense of purpose, what is that preferred craft, value, and impact that you're making?
Right. Arthur, go back for just a minute on the impact side. So again, it's society, individuals, and again, what's the third one?
Individual, organization, and society.
Right.
So if you think of this,
Yeah. So I think what I love so practical about that is just imagine for a moment, both for an individual or for a team or a leader, right? That if you know that someone really finds purpose in their job by influencing individuals, then you know that you want to reward that, recognize that. You know you want to make sure the job they're going to be in allows them to impact individuals. If somebody says, I'm mostly, really my impact is about societal impact, then you've really got to think about, how do I help them make the connection between their job and the impact it has on society, right? And sometimes you might even say, is this the right job for this person, right? Because they're mostly going to be helping individuals, but is there a way for me to help them see the connection with the societal? So to me, there's a lot of incredible practicality when you begin to help people kind of really look at this.
That's right. That's right. And, this is the journey we really want to see people go down. And that is that if we think of how we not only understand our own personal purpose, but ultimately lead with it, we want you to gain self-awareness and discover your personal why. Take ownership of that, link it to the work that you're leading every day, learn that it doesn't have to retreat from your organization to find it. Activate it in your work, and that is taking action. To Amy's work, job tailoring, job hacking. Make your work your own by applying your purpose. We have actually some really interesting tools for taking inventory of the competencies you built around your purpose to look at developmental areas where you can focus. And then finally, leadership. The most important piece of this is, how do you now begin to use your purpose and the knowledge of other people's purpose to begin empowering others, to bring belonging to teams and to bring people together? And we believe that it's very difficult to do any of that, to inspire and motivate others and build belonging on teams, if you're not aware of your own purpose as a leader. So there is a sort of a sequence to this that we think is important. And oftentimes we go straight to managerial best practices, right? That it becomes hard if we don't know who the leader is at their core and what truly drives them and governs them. How do we expect anyone to be a transformational leader for their teams? So we see this as kind of the journey of purpose, and we believe every organization in every line of business, from blue collar to white collar, from minimum wage to a lot of wage, has the ability to do this. I think the accessibility of the model is really what we want to bring to the world, right?
Yeah, I agree with you.
So we'll go through in a little bit of detail, and I know, John, we want to reserve as much time for questions. We already have some really good questions coming in, but just to give you a sense of the platform that you'll all have access to and some of the core components of this. One of the core aspects is you're discovering your personal purpose. So you onboard to a personal profile. You go through a nice kind of interactive questionnaire of about 10 or 15 minutes. What we're learning in this process is, first, how fulfilled are you at work? Second, what drives you? What are your core purpose drivers in these dimensions of your craft, your impact, and your values? And we want you to be able to understand and believe that purpose is possible at work, gain some self-awareness around what gives you purpose, and then alignment to the work that you're leading today. One of the interesting things is, John had mentioned the work that organizations are leading now on this work. And we have a number of organizations John has really helped articulate their purpose. And one of the amazing opportunities we're already seeing, even with banks in this case, is helping organizations evangelize their purpose and connect it to personal purpose. So we've actually built in some interesting opportunities where an organization can link its organizational purpose to this individual framework. So as an individual at a place like SunTrust Bank, I can already learn, how does my purpose, being driven by organizational impact, come to life at SunTrust? So a big part of this is not feeling like you have to leave your organization to find your purpose, but figuring out the way that it aligns.
Yeah, very, very, very true. And so often that is the challenge for people, is they see, oh my God, I have to leave here to become, purpose driven.
That's right. That's right. The second aspect was activating purpose, which is all about basically taking action in your existing work around purpose. I mentioned this skills inventory, but one of the interesting things we developed is this purpose-driven development plan, which is all about how you take stock of your existing competencies and to look at interesting ways that you can apply your purpose in a developmental way. And then finally, the last phase is leadership, and that is helping you understand how you look at purpose across your team. So what do I share with my team? If I'm building a connection with someone directly, what are the ways that I can give them feedback, empower them, support them, complement them in my work and their work, so we're working together in a really aligned way? And so the leadership piece of this is all about being in service of others. And we've been able to build team-level reports as well as individual colleague connection capabilities to really build that social component.
Yeah, so one of the cool things I love about this platform is the ability for a leader to be able to look at the team and get a sense of where the team. So imagine as a leader now, if you had a group of 20 people who report to you, and suddenly I know where they get their sense of purpose. And there's even the capacity within the tool to have people track how they're doing, right? So the leader can even know how, not in literally in real time, but close enough, are people really experiencing that, and where's their challenges, right? So I think it really becomes a kind of holistic way to lead purpose in a way that is difficult to do without these kind of tools.
Yeah, that's right. I think a big part of this, to your point, John, is building a language around something that has been pretty ethereal and challenging for people to grasp, historically. So to help people realize, well, I these myths and misconceptions I've had, or these barriers I've built, can be overcome through self-awareness and through shared dialogue and through action. And I have a lot more control, by the way, than I thought I did. Those are big breakthroughs for people.
Yeah. And, to me, what I think too is that many people think of purpose as just some like singular thing, like, well, I like to help people, right?
Yeah.
But that's not, no pun intended, not very helpful to deepen it, right? But if I go back to my own example, when I understand what I care about is helping people be more intentional and creating a more sustainable future. And I love storytelling and inspiring people and getting them to think differently. And I like influencing systems while also having a deep impact on individuals. I can begin to really think about the complexity of how I live my purpose, and also how to really begin to activate it, not just around some big idea like, well, John wants to help the world, Well, that's not really very helpful in figuring out how to tailor your day-to-day experience to hack your life and work around your purpose. But when you begin to see the nuance, to me, that's where the magic starts to happen. And I think it's hard to get at that nuance without, most people, it would be very hard for them to get there without a framework.
That's right. That's right. And, so I want to just bring up a couple different aspects here of where we start to see this come to life. One is, we see a lot of high growth organizations now that are struggling with building culture that's empowering people while getting things done. And, especially we know there's such a challenge with the frontline manager. How do we get a frontline manager to, while checking all the other boxes for, managing their team, reporting up, reporting down, to still be inspiring and empowering? And how do we reach a manager in that process? So basically, we've begun to see, a really interesting new approach to manager and leadership development through the lens of purpose, bringing people along this journey from discover to activate to lead. And just to give you one kind of interesting case study, Huddle, which is a high growth tech company in the Midwest, was seeing again that their frontline managers were really struggling. Their culture was beginning to wane. They had some folks that were, in this case, really they were reporting a lower retention. And they began to cascade this across their leadership team of 300 folks. And everyone got their purpose profile. They started to do purpose training. And in the course of 10 months, they already saw a 6% decrease in attrition, pointing to the fact that an emphasis on purpose and personal purpose was the only major change they had made in that entire process, in that entire time. So, again, just seeing that organizations can make this shift sometimes even after they've been growing. This doesn't have to just be small, nimble organizations that sort of undergo this type of transformation. Disney, by the way, is one of the organizations now on this journey. And it's amazing to see even an organization that large can be empowering its people to discover their personal why at work. And we start to see this even with larger organizations. MetLife, a group that's had a really strong purpose, but just recently has kind of articulated it in a new way, has developed, employee development programs around purpose, largely tied to their diversity and inclusion efforts, as well as their high potential leadership programs. Campbell's, who underwent a really kind of interesting journey in the last year, a lot of change, and in a place where they're amidst a lot of organizational changes, we know that can either create a culture of fear. What they decided to do is to leverage personal purpose as a mechanism for empowerment, and they have really sent a strong signal to everyone in the organization that we want you to come as your full best self at work. We want you to find your personal purpose here and bring it to life in a way that you own your journey here. That sends such a strong signal. VF Corporation, which many would never have heard of, it was kind of like a shell company that owns all kinds of great brands like North Face and Timberland and Vans. They decided for the very first time to articulate their organizational purpose, which is all about shaping movements. And to evangelize that organizational purpose, they decided to use this activation of individual purpose. And so they've cascaded the discovery of personal purpose through their organization, now about to go to all of their brands. And they've seen a powerful way that instead of just launching that organizational purpose and saying, here it is, here's the press release, best of luck, get back to work. They said, in this juncture, we want you to find your personal purpose here and see how it connects into this great new purpose we've just defined for the organization. And so really great, examples of all different sizes, of all different industries where organizations are taking really courageous steps in this movement. And I think, by the way, seeing incredible results. So John and I, we've had a chance to work with a whole plethora of organizations, but it's just, to me, amazing that there's no industry or job type or function that's off limits in this line of work.
Yeah, I think, one of the fascinating case studies, Arthur, to me was, West Elm that, started. One of the things we talk about in Purpose Revolution is to start to describe job purpose more than job function. And so on West Elm began to, in their recruiting, describe all jobs as, around purpose rather than function. And though they had a significant decrease in the number of job applicants, they had a big increase in the number of qualified people they would consider hiring.
Yeah.
And so to me, purpose is also, it serves the tool of beginning to make sure you're hiring people who really are connected to that sense of purpose. Arthur, before we kind of make the offer and then get into some dialogue, I want to ask you a quick question. I know you guys with LinkedIn have done some research, said, what is it, about 37% of the global workforce are kind of purpose focused. Yeah. What does that mean? When you say that about 37 or just over 1/3 of people are purpose focused, what does that really mean? How are they different than other people? And how might that impact hiring? Then we'll get into some questions.
Yeah, it's a great question, John. So you mentioned the research of Amy Wierzniewski and Jane Dutton around this idea of job career calling. What they found is we each have a mindset and a narrative around our work and why we're here. And for some of us, it's purely a job and it's a means to an end. For some of us, it's a career and it's just an opportunity to climb the ladder. For others, it's a calling. And our ability to gain fulfillment and meaning from our work is the major driver behind why we're here. And the calling-oriented, or what we call purpose-oriented employees, we learned from our study with LinkedIn, make up about 37% of the workforce, and they're the highest performers by every measure. So they really are the employees of choice when an organization is hiring. You want to find purpose-oriented, purpose-driven employees. And so that really has been a major driver behind our work, is how do you create a more purpose-driven workplace and when you're hiring, become the employer of choice for these people who are purpose-driven.
Right. Yeah, and what occurs to me is that there's two sides to that coin. On the one hand, people could say, oh, good, we just want to hire the 37% who are purpose-focused. And certainly there are reasons to do that, and there's some great tools in terms of how you interview, et cetera, that, can really help people do that. One of the simplest things we like to do is ask people, in your last job, what gave you the greatest sense of fulfillment? What was most motivating for you? At the end of a good week, what really made it a good week? And you're really listening to see if people are talking about, things that are more like a calling versus more self-oriented things. But I guess one of the questions is, Arthur, is I really feel like tools like this, I believe almost every person has purpose within them. They may just not associate work with purpose. So I think let's not confuse. It's not like only 37% of people care about purpose. It's just only 37% of people see their job as connected to purpose. So tools like this and other things allow us to activate that purpose so people can bring it from the outside world into the workplace.
That's exactly right. And that's a key point, is no one is a lost cause. Some people don't believe purpose is possible at work, and that's fine. Let's help them find what gives them purpose outside of work, and then see that they can bring it to life in the work that they lead. And that's exactly the idea.
Exactly. Well, look, we want to get to some questions. So we want to talk about an offer we're going to make to you today. Normally, you'd have to pay to get this profile, but we have a special bonus offer today for those of you on the webinar. If you just go to drjohnizzo.com/purpose, /purpose-webinar, and I'll leave that up on the screen for a few minutes so you can write it down, take a picture of it. You can go there and we're going to send you a link so you can take the tool and find out where you get your sense of purpose. And it also will really give you a chance to kick the tires and see how this tool might be useful for you. It might not be useful for you or your organization. If it is, we'd love to hear from you. And we'd love to hear from you. Just, was it helpful for you in terms of identifying your own purpose? So again, for the moment, let's go back to questions. I'll put this back up on the screen at the end. But again, feel free to go to this drjohnizzo.com/purpose-webinar and really give you a chance to do that. So let's take a look at some of the questions that we have here, and we'll take a look at some of the. And Arthur, you may have been looking at these. I was busy kind of.
I just started looking at. We have some amazing questions here, so we'll try to get through as many of these as possible.
So here's one from Angela. How can we reconcile purpose with many in the C-suite who are very focused on shareholder value and making Wall Street happy so they get a healthy stock bonus, this can really derail these types of otherwise great employee-centric approaches. So, a couple of thoughts from myself. First, even at the most senior level, my discovery has been even many of the most senior people in organizations that are very profit-focused have rarely had the chance to think about what their purpose is. I found it's really tremendous when I can get even people at the C-suite level beginning to ask questions like, what's my legacy? What do I want to leave behind? What is my purpose? Heineken Mexico, that's a client of ours. When Dolph Vandenbrink went there as the new CEO, one of the first things he did was getting the senior team to ask, what's your personal purpose in your life? People said, my family, my kids, leaving a better future for the next generation in my family. Then when he began to ask, what's the organizational purpose, different things began, including their new purpose to win big for a better Mexico. Let's win big, but let's make a better Mexico. The other answer to that question for me, Angela, is that I think even within companies that are very shareholder focused, an individual leader who begins to get people asking what their personal purpose is, that begins to engage in this conversation, can activate purpose even in a very money-driven system. Now, obviously better when it's all aligned, and that's why Arthur, we love working together, because we're always working at that big picture level trying to get people to move in this direction. But don't underestimate the ability of people to find purpose and activate it in their own job, even in systems that are not focused that way. Arthur, do you see a question that you'd like to kind of take on here?
Yeah, let's see here. So there was a great question at the end around. So I know I'm working backwards here, but
that's okay.
But there was a great question at the end here, just around the what do you do in a culture? Let me see if I can just do this justice here. So I believe Elizabeth had asked, we talk about leadership as part of the service, as being service-driven, but the part that I struggle with is how to articulate that connection between purpose and service and advance this within a culture that's historically fraught with adversarial, fear-driven framework. Healthcare, which is, Elizabeth, I hear that a lot out of healthcare, which is really unfortunate. And John, I know you've got some ideas here, but I think this is a paradigm shift. From a fear-based culture where the bottom 10% is cut, right, and we punish people when they don't perform, versus an empowerment culture, which is all about helping people bring their greatest contribution out to life and have a sense of ownership. And John is the expert in organizational change. The only thing I would say before passing it to him would be that there are bright spots within every organization, I believe, that can be the early adopters or early evangelists of a new model. It doesn't have to be changing everyone overnight, but instead finding those bright spots. Maybe it's employee resource groups, or it's certain departments that have been very human-centered, and starting with given leaders or starting with given units as the catalyst for what can follow. But John, again, you leading these types of transformations, you probably have the greatest insights on this.
No, great insight, and I agree with you. And often, of course, these things are best driven from the top down. And I know, Elizabeth, you mentioned Dan. I know Dan pretty well because I have TELUS is a client of mine. In fact, I'm currently working with Darren, the CEO, and the organization to reimagine their purpose in a new way. But, one of the things that I think is, really true, I won't name the company, but I have a very large company, a Fortune, 50 company that's approached me. One of their senior people has come to me and said, I really think this purpose work could really make a difference for us. But, the company is very financially driven right now. We have the founder and the CEO, the chairman of the board is very purpose focused, but it's not really the way the system works. And I gave her 3 pieces of advice that I would give to you. The first is never underestimate the power of a few leaders or champions getting together and starting informally to ask, how can we activate more purpose in the organization and in our lives and work? I've seen so many times, as Peter Block, one of my mentors, says, that, you know, the moment two people begin a conversation with each other, it's the beginning of change. And so, you know, get together those informal people who say, we want to shift the system. I remember working with a big healthcare system in the Midwest years ago, that the renewal of the system really began with a group of 35 people who started meeting once a week saying, how can we bring more spirit to this organization? How can we bring more life again, more service orientation back? And the group became so magnetic and energized that eventually the CEO heard about it and asked if he could come sit in on their meetings, their weekly meetings. And to make a long story short, it really began to transform the organization. So I'm a big believer in not waiting for the permission that we're always waiting for, right? So find a few other people who really think this could make a difference. The second thing is, I said to her, expose a few leaders in the organization who are ready and willing to these ideas. So I'm going in there now and speaking to a smaller group of leaders, a more informal kind of conversation, and to begin to say, how could we together begin to activate purpose in the organization? So I'm a big believer in guerrilla change that has to happen in organizations. We have a question from Greg. I understand that 92 to 93% of people are unable to express their personal values. How does this play when understanding one's values is central to understanding their purpose? Well, good question, Greg. And one thing I love about the imperative tool is that it's actually a practical way through a tool. So Greg, when you take the tool, I think you'll see that it allows people to organize that conversation. So many people don't know where to begin. So this is a great beginning for people to start to articulate those values, but by being able to choose, you know, from among these archetypes, if you will, that already exist. So I think, again, not to promote the tool in a kind of silly way, but that's exactly why I'm so excited, Greg, about tools like this, because it is hard for people to do that because they've never been trained to do it. They go through school never having to do it. So this is a way to begin to allow people to do that. So we need tools for people, the bottom line.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah, and I think, again, a framework helps people go from, you know, what are my values, where do I start, to, you know, reacting to very specific questions that help lead people down a sort of common path. And so I think that really is the utility of, to John's point, using tools and using frameworks.
Another question there, Arthur, that you see?
Yeah, so let's just pull this up. There was a good question, again, toward the end here. So Allison was asking about developing a time bank for people with disabilities and want to empower them to connect with their purpose through service and exchange. Do you have suggestions on how to keep purpose-oriented baked into the site's construction? That's a great question. Well, you know, one of the key areas that I would just consider is if we think of you know, engagement is a metric for success that I think is a bit old school. If we start to think of fulfillment being a new metric for success around purpose, you know, if I'm connected to a sense of personal purpose, I'm fulfilled. We're finding that 3 ways you can measure fulfillment are the depth of your relationship, so basically your social capital, the extent to which you're making an impact, and then the extent to which you're growing. And we would hope that as you go through this type of framework, if you connect to your personal drivers like John does, you're fulfilled in each of those 3 areas. So you might consider using fulfillment as the metric for success, and looking at ways that you measure that, and how the time bank actually enables that. How do I feel significant social capital and growth and development from the work that the time bank is doing? Sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, a couple of things I would just add to that. First of all, in our book, The Purpose Revolution, we have a whole section on kind of how you kind of really build a purpose-driven website for your company, especially a portal that employees and prospective employees would come to. But here's another thing is, you know, storytelling is the heart of purpose. When we talk in organizations, we always say, like, if you can imagine, you know, that oil is what keeps everything lubricated in an engine. That the same thing is true. Stories are the lubricant in a purpose-driven team or organization. So one of our clients, DSW, the shoe retailer, one of the things that they've really done around their purpose, which is happiness through self-expression, is to really constantly have, through social media internally in the company, people telling stories of when they've gotten to live their purpose. So I would really encourage you to use this portal as a place for people to tell their story, either in writing or through videos. Videos are great, simple YouTube videos, or that people could on their smartphone say, hey, today I got to live my purpose, to live our purpose, here's how. Because we learn as human beings through thousands of years, we've learned from stories. So again, and the book has a number of things. David Boyce, good question. Have the two of you other joint efforts going on in addition to this webinar, or are the independent resources? First, two great books, The Purpose Economy by Aaron Hurst, the co-founder there of Imperative with Arthur, and of course, Jeff Vanderweilen in my book, The Purpose Revolution. Both have a lot of great resources in them. Certainly on our website, and I'm sure on Imperatives, there are a lot of videos and resources. We've certainly got a whole set of resources on YouTube as well. And we are collaborating in companies with this purpose tool, us working at the kind of leadership level and, really helping the company think about the system around purpose and how to drive it, and really using the Imperative tool as a way to really drive it from an individual and team perspective. And again, if you stay connected to us, you go to my website, drjohnizzo.com. You can sign up to be on our regular newsletter, and then you'll hear about the various things that we're doing. Are there any other good questions there that you see?
Well, they're all good questions. Yeah, let's see. I think we've got time for one.
I meant any other questions. I know they're all good questions. Any dumb questions you see?
Dumb questions
no, just
you
kidding.
See? That's right. I'm just looking here. We already talked a bit about reconciling purpose with the C-suite. Is that right?
Yes, we did.
Yeah, so
here's a new one.
Yeah.
Have you seen examples where leaders are connecting purpose-inspired people together who can share or co-create and support each other in their pursuits? If so, what outcomes have you witnessed? Arthur, any quick answer to that one?
Oh boy, why don't you start? I'm gonna give that one a little bit of thought.
Again, I've seen these portals of storytelling are a great example. One of the things we do in companies is have each leader identify their personal purpose and then share it regularly, not only with their teams, but also to almost have like profiles within the company where they say, and my purpose is. So really trying to normalize this idea of purpose. I think that, that's a very powerful thing. I've really seen the impact at companies like Unilever, where people now begin regularly when they introduce themselves as leaders saying, hey, I'm John, and by the way, my purpose is to, right? One way I got to live that purpose recently is. So I think getting leaders to talk more about that and share that regularly not only makes them rock stars, but it begins to create a common language around this kind of thinking.
I agree. And, when we've been, supporting purpose activations, getting leaders, especially the CEOs, to get up on stage and talk about their purpose stories. Why are you here? What drives you in this work? And how does your personal purpose feed into that? It sends such a strong signal to the rest of the organization that it's safe to do the same thing. And we want you to bring your full selves to work. So I think you're absolutely right, John. The most the most low-hanging fruit opportunity in any of this work is storytelling. And we can create the space for stories and we can inspire leaders to share. It just creates a transformational opportunity.
Yeah, it's really true. So I know our time is just about up here. Arthur, I'll give you a moment for some closing words, but let me remind you, I've got it on the screen. We would love you to take the profile. Within a very short time, you also will get the recording of the webinar, which you are able to share with others, and we hope you will. Share it as widely with anybody you want. Share it on your social media. We'd love to spread the gospel and get more people activating purpose. So you will get that link very shortly in the next 24 to 48 hours. In the meantime, you can sign up to take that yourself. We'd love to do that. Arthur, any other closing words?
No, this was wonderful, John, and thank you all for your questions. I think that the powerful thing about this is it does start with each of us. So I hope that this profile and this conversation is a great starting point for each of us personally as leaders. And I'm excited that we can all collectively work to scale this and cascade it in our organization. So thank you for what you're all doing.
Yeah, and thank you, Arthur. These guys are doing great work, and we'd love to hear from you guys if this sounds like a tool you're interested in. So thanks again. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you, Arthur. Keep up the great work. I hope to see you soon in Madrid or somewhere else.
That's right. Thanks, John. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye now.